let me quickly define and set the context, right? What the planning and forecasting is in the context of our discussion today. In simple words, planning is about setting goals and mapping out resources needed to achieve these goals. It involves budgeting, allocating resources, and creating strategies to ensure a company's long-term stability and growth. And forecasting is about predicting the future financial outcomes of a company based on past and present data. Together, planning and forecasting provide the insights and structure to manage data and allocate resources and make decisions. Updating forecast allows companies to adapt to market conditions and internal factors that are always changing. Now, if you have bad planning processes, it makes it difficult to create reliable forecasts. And this can lead to a whole bunch of negative really factors, such as like cost adjustments, reduced accuracy, and challenges in aligning goals between departments. Elisa, here I wanted to kind of bring you into a discussion a little bit. I know that at Getinge, you guys chose the Power On solution to as a group planning tool, right, to do some complex business requirements. Such as the driver-based planning. Could you please tell us on the high level, right, without going into details, what were the main advantages and reasons for that implementation?
Yes, so Getinge wanted in general just a more modern solution for the rolling forecast, and that should be ideally integrated into the current reporting tool, which is Power BI. Of course, it should be efficient and stable. For the user, it should be really easy to use, but at the same time, deliver really good results to the consumers of the collected data.
Your challenges, I mean, some of the other challenges, your challenges are obviously unique to your company. They may not all apply, right? But what in general our clients have been reporting is basically the outdated planning tools. What they have is inaccurate forecast, right? You have data silos where different departments have basically their own lives. Like you have a finance department, you have operations, you have procurement, and all of them have their own kind of data sets. And that there's no single source of truth, and that creates problems. And obviously all of that leads to, high cost of maintenance. All right, so let's kind of talk more about the limitations of traditional tools like Excel. And before I start, like I love Excel. Like Excel is the first tool that I personally learned. It's something that is dear to my heart. I mean, I use it every single day, and I really don't like talking bad about it. But that being said, right, Excel is super flexible. It's familiar and very customizable. And I think that's why a lot of the finance teams are still relying on Excel for planning and forecasting. And I've seen statistics somewhere, and it's almost 80% of companies. I mean, it's probably less now with the development of newer tools, but a couple of years ago it was almost 80%. And I'm sure you have all seen that funny meme where you have this elephant balancing on a ball, and it says like the entire financial system standing on Excel. And then there's like this little ant holding that ball, which says like Excel can work with files from like whatever 90s or something. So the message here, right, is really that Excel has its limits. And some of them are the lack of real-time collaboration. So it's not designed for multiple people, right? It makes collaboration slow and prone to errors, and updates are not synchronized in real time. Difficulty with version control, data silos, I talked about it a little bit earlier, and manual data entry. And also like limited scalability for complex financial models. I mean, Excel cannot handle large data sets, and that's just limitation. Excel was not built for the demands of today's financial planning. Now, Greg, I wanted to ask you here, maybe you can share a story, right? Having worked with Excel in the past, obviously many years, what kind of challenges did you meet in with Excel, maybe from your previous work as well?
Yeah, of course. So, before I answer that, I just want to reiterate on what you told. I see that many times that clients, big clients come to us and they are still planning in Excel. And in many cases, that's a nightmare because, as you mentioned, as well, Excel was designed in the 80s or in the 90s, and that's not really an ERP tool. It's not really a planning application. It's more like a data prep tool, right? Where you can transform your data, copy and paste, but it's really not designed for collaboration. That's what I see, and based on that, I can also share my experience. Like a few years ago, I was working with a company where we did the timesheets in an Excel basis, and this was a nightmare because it was, with some VBA macro magic, and it was really hard to release a newer version. Someone was using a previous version of the Excel file, then it didn't synchronize correctly to the SharePoint server, and then we had issues around consolidating the data and pulling those into Power BI, and then the Power BI scheduled refresh failed. So it was really a nightmare because we then tried to use Excel as a collaborative tool for inputting timesheet entries, whereas Excel is not a collaborative tool or not designed for such complex collaboration which you would need, for example, for budgeting and planning. So that's really my experience, and this timesheet example is a one which I can explicitly name.
Yeah, I also had a similar experience where when I worked in finance, the budget would have like a final version, right? And then you would like send it to people, and then you'll get it like final one, and then it'll go like final, and then it'll go like final_final, and then the date, and then it's like the actual final. And long story short, you'll have like 20 different Excel files, and you don't know which one's final, right? And then God forbid if somebody grabbed one of those old files and put it into the actual report, that's it, right? So yeah, those were the Excel days. I mean, but then again, like, I don't want to personally trash too much on Excel. Like, I love Excel, but it's just not as dynamic, right?
Yeah. It's just to add on that, it's really not a tool to build application with, especially not collaborative applications. And I think that's why many people struggle with doing budgeting and forecasting in Excel, because budgeting and forecasting is a collaborative exercise. I think, Elisa, you know that because you had the same with Getinge. So it's really, Excel is not suitable for such collaboration.
Agility is everything, and then Writeback tools like Power On, can help teams to make real-time adjustments. And when market conditions, and then, I mean, we live in a crazy world. Things change every single day, and company priorities change, market conditions change. So with that real-time data, teams have a clear and more accurate view of data, and then they can update reports instantly. So we're talking about more agility, we're talking about better alignment across departments, and we're talking about scalability because we have a lot of data these days, right? Now we're getting into the heart of the conversation, really, like how the Power On Writeback solution, right? It's one of those tools. When I got introduced to it, I was just wow. Like I didn't know much about it before. Like, it allows you to enter, update, modify data directly from Power BI. And so that's a really important thing. Like, everything is in Power BI. What Power On does, right? It turns Power BI into a two-way street. So it's not only a reporting and analysis tool like it used to be, but it turns it into a more of a dynamic collaboration-based solution with real-time data entry, ability to compare different versions and run forecast all in one place. And this is what I like about it. The key advantages of Power On that I kind of wanted to talk about is obviously the real-time the updates. So you have a grid, you type in, save, boom, everything goes into the data source, right? you have version control, you have audit trail, you have collaborative planning, and then you also have the ability to customize solution for custom scenarios. And Greg, I mean, you're one of the people who knows Power On solution probably better than anybody in this world. And can you tell us about, maybe some interesting cases from your experience where you had to customize, the Power On solution to fit a client's very specific needs that were kind of unique to them, and how did you manage to do that?
Yes, of course, Nik, and just to reiterate on that, that's really the core strengths of Power On, that you can really build input templates on demand, right? Because traditional planning solutions are pretty much limited, that you can do whatever that planning solution offers. But with Power On, you have more flexibility because you can build these different input templates for inputting budgeting and forecasting data. We recently had a use case where it was not a budgeting, but a KPI tracking use case. Yeah. And they had a very, very specific requirement around how to input the KPIs, how to manage the status, how to approve those KPIs, etc. They had a very specific Excel-based KPI tracking. And with Power On, we were able to replicate that KPI tracking grid almost the same way as it used to be in the Excel world, right? So it was really specific rules around mapping between the KPIs, etc. And with relative ease, we were able to replicate those KPI tracking grid. And currently now I'm working on a project where we are doing an expense and headcount planning. And there we also have some interesting requirements around how to calculate the headcount based, or how to calculate the expenses based on the length of the months, because there are some months which are like 20 days, some are 22 days, etc. So there are always these niche requirements, these interesting client-specific requirements which are easily implementable with Power On. And that is what I really like with Power On. Me as well, like 4 years ago when I was introduced to Power On, I really liked this approach to be able to build custom business applications easily within the Power BI platform. So that's my answer to this question.
Yeah, I remember you particularly enjoyed these like hard, challenging cases where you could just kind of use ability to customize Power On and like take on these like challenging requirements, and that's good. It's good to see that you're still doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. More specifically to Getinge, right? Let's maybe bring Elisa here into the conversation. In your department or your company, I know that you have the complex logic, like how does Power On handle that? Driver-based planning, for example, where you have a mix of unit-based and value-based planning and modules with different logic. If you could tell us a little bit about that, please.
Yeah, as you said, in our use case, there were very specific and complex requirements on business side. Yeah. For example, one of the main points was the driver-based planning. And let me quickly explain that. So it means that the user does not only enter a forecast value, for example, for net sales, but they also, with that, give already the explanation of what the change in that value would be caused by in reference to last year's value. For example, for net sales, the user would basically input price impact and the volume impact. And then that would already explain which portion of the forecasted value would be driven by price and which portion would be driven by volume. And those drivers, we wanted to also be possible to enter as a percentage. So the user could say, okay, this year we expect an increase of the price of about 5%. And then the system will handle that information. And to achieve all that, we use the Power On data entry matrix visual. And in that, you can use the Power BI DAX measures to apply logic, such as our percentage entry. So it's rather easy. You can use the already available functionality in Power BI to achieve your logic. So that already helped us to handle those complex requirements. But then to take it a bit further, of course, this was we had also to manage different modules, and they required then different drivers and different aggregation levels for the entry. And all of this additional complexity required additional logic, which you guys from Centida helped us to put into a custom allocation procedure, so a stored procedure on SQL Server. And yeah, that's how our requirements were put into the solution with Power On.
Without getting into details too much, like what specific needs led your company to develop this, to work on this?
Yeah. So let me just quickly explain. So the stored procedure is triggered whenever the Power On engine writes back a value to the SQL Server. So user puts a value in, hits save, gets written back, then the stored procedure is triggered. And this procedure basically contains the logic of which parts of the entered value should be written to which data record. So it allocates the value in the right way.
Right.
And now, coming to your question, what were the needs for that? And basically, it came from our driver-based approach, which I explained a minute ago. So the requirement was that we did not just want to evenly distribute the data. We wanted to take into account last year's value and take that ratio into account and distribute the input value based on that.
You had Power BI already, right? So how did that, having Power BI and having that familiar environment, how did it reduce the need for training? How was the user adoption because of that?
Yeah, so in our case, with the introduction of the new tool, there was also a significant change of the process. So it was still a challenge to get all the users on board and provide adequate training. But nevertheless, it helped that at least the environment, both for the input of the data and also for the analysis of the data, was familiar instead of entirely new.
Yeah.
And that was also one of the main advantages we saw with the use of Power On.
That being said, guys, can we kind of jump into the technical demo so we can see that in action, basically,
Of course. So I guess that's going to be me to share the screen. Let me know if the screen is visible. It should be.
It is. Yeah.
So I will show first a very simple example to demonstrate what really Power On is and how it works. So you can see in this Power BI report, we have these nice shoes for which we created a sales forecast. And I will select this shoe and go to override forecast. And on this screen, we can see some nice Power BI charts. So actually, like whatever is here in the top, these are just regular Power BI chart. But with Power On, we have this Writeback capable chart where I'm able to adjust the data, right? So let's say that I would like to add some forecast adjustments to the week of the 10th of January. I will just copy all these values. I will even hit this override checkbox and add the comment I had to adjust my sales plan, right? That quickly and that easily, I just hit save, and immediately after the save, all these changes are reflected on this visual, on all these regular Power BI visuals. I'm able to show and indicate the adjustments which I did. And that is really the power of Power On, to be able to build such custom business applications for inputting forecast data, forecast adjustments, commentary, etc.
Now, in like a couple sentences, if possible, can you explain people watching this, like how does Writeback happen? Like what actually happens in the back?
Yeah, it's our magic basically, but long story short, what is happening here, that whenever I hit the save button, behind the scenes, it is sending a request to the database, to the underlying database, to insert or update that change. So in this case, it is an update because I'm adding some adjustments to some existing values. So whenever I hit the save button, this is writing back to the very database underneath that, and then it is repulling the data to Power BI. That is why these changes are reflected immediately. So it's a cycle of writing back the data and then repulling the data. That is
what
it in
if
a
I'm
nutshell.
working with like, 5 other guys and we're like kind of working on the same report? We're all going to see that immediately, right?
That is correct.
Yeah.
So even people without Writeback access can yet see these changes in these charts, which I did.
That's right. And obviously this respects role level security. And let's say I have a situation where, I am, let's say, a department lead and I want to make a couple people not able to write back on certain products. For example, on products not from my market, from like other market.
Yeah, exactly. So as you mentioned, Nik, role level security is respected, but besides that, PowerOn has a feature called Write Security. And with this Write Security feature, you can restrict in a very, very granular way which data should be editable and which data should not be editable. And without going into much details, I will just show you that now I'm able to do some changes on this grid, right? So you will see that we will get the save completed. But if I change my permissions, and here we just a very, very simple permission, but I will change my permissions to a reader. And once I do so, and if I try to do some changes, now I get an error message. And don't call this number because this is just a fake number which we did for this demo report, but you get the idea that with PowerOn you can drive the security and restrict edit, restrict reading of the data.
Now, can we take a look at the financial report and maybe, if possible, you could show us how to do versions, like how you can, let's say I would like to plan, I don't want to mess the data that I have now. Instead, I would like to create a new version just for my own kind of department and play with it, see with what if scenarios possible.
So you can see this is actually our budget planner application. This is an application which we built with the PowerOn technology. And you can see here I have bunch of versions already, right? For example, this is a version from the 8th of November. And if I don't want to edit this because I'm okay with that, but I want to create a copy of that, then I can just go to add new, and I can select a copy from version. So I will just filter on this 8th of November version, this one. I will add the new like Greg demo, and today is the 13th of November. I'm just adding the name of that and save. And this will create a new scenario, a copy of that version, right? So once I go back, you will see that this version was now copied, right? We can see that this is the exact same number, but yet now I can do my scenario planning and adjustments, etc. in this particular version. So if I go to the input screens, you will see that we will have data there already because we created that as a copy. And now I can just do the adjustments. Actually, we just had a single line here, but you get the idea.
Now, I can see that, let's say I have 10 guys in my department and we all start creating different versions. That's a recipe for low performance, right? Because if everybody creates 10 versions, that's like 100 versions. So basically, how can I limit that only a couple people can create scenarios?
Of course. So with PowerOn, as I showed previously, we can drive the security. So we can drive who is able to do what. We can even limit, for example, that maximum number of scenarios is, let's say, 3 scenarios per user if you don't want to have too much data, right? So there are different ways of managing that.
And can you do a workflow where, I would have to like review before accepting that version?
Yes, of course. You can see here, this is my my version, which I just created. And if I go to submit, then this is where I can send these versions for approval, and then it will go live only if the particular approvals will hit the approve or maybe the reject button. So definitely such life cycle management of the data is very common with Power On, almost in all use cases, one way or the other, but we do some sort of versioning.
Right. And then like another situation which could be interesting is like, let's say we have a fourth quarter still happening, right? So I want to do Writeback for the fourth quarter, but at the same time, I would like to, lock the previous month that shouldn't be changed.
Yep, exactly. This is also something which we can do with our Write Security feature. You can see here that January, February, March, and April, those are logged. So those are not editable, and the Writeback is only possible on the open period. So such locking mechanisms are also something which can be configured with Power On.
Mm-hmm. Good. Now, we don't have a lot of time. Just real quick, how long does it take to set up Power On solution and integrate it with Power BI? Like if I have, let's say I already have SQL Server and Power BI.
Yeah. Just from a technical perspective, it's like a matter of hours, right? So if especially if the use case is very simple, just the Writeback itself can be set up really easily. Usually I say that a Power On project is approximately 20% about Power On, and the 80% is like about scoping the business needs, defining the different business rules, the security rules, the workflow rules, etc. So such an implementation project, it's not really Power On heavy, but it's also focusing on the end-to-end scoping and implementation of the requirements, and that is where, for example, you guys, our partners, come into the picture, who help us nicely and our clients to do an end-to-end implementation, not just the Power On bit, but in the entire process, workflow, etc.
That's exactly right. And here you did basically a call to action. We are Centida is a partner of Power On, and we help companies to optimize planning, operations, processes through consulting and implementing analytic solutions, including Power On. We are one of those experts who can do some challenging cases, and we love doing that. And if you have questions, if you're interested to know more about Power On or how we could help your planning processes, reach out to us. You can email me. You can reach me out on LinkedIn. Well, you can email also Insight Software, and they can refer cases to us as well, to me. That being said, Elisa, Greg, thanks a lot for your time. This was a very interesting conversation, very refreshing. Good to see you guys. Hopefully we can do more of these in the future.
Thank you, Nik.
Thanks.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining in.